Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to Let's Talk Maywood on Diversity.
Dr. Ratliff, we are live. I don't know what happened to our intro.
Oh, it was there, bro. We went to the whole shebang, and now you on. I was about to introduce you. Everyone.
Oh, I didn't see it on. Look, I didn't see it on my end.
Yeah, technology, man. I got it. But look, we are on Diversity Today Media. This is Let's Talk Maywood. I'm your host, Dr. Reggie Ratliff, and to my right, or on the screen is to the left, is world-class, world-renowned, certified, licensed financial or investment advisor, Terrence Hollingsworth. Good evening, brother. How you doing?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm good, man. Let's jump right into it. We were expecting a guest to come on, Attorney Carl Nicolas, I think his name is. But he said something came up, and we're gonna try him next week. But in the meantime, just like the clock, everything continues to move forward. Time goes forward. It stands for nobody. So we wish him well in his endeavors. If he comes on next week, so be it. And we just pray that we'll be able to get him on eventually, if at all. But before you and I talk about what's going on, Terry, I want to acknowledge a recognition that you received into the Hall of Fame in Iowa. Talk about that for a second, man. What kind of award was this that you received?
So tomorrow, I'm going into the Iowa Volunteer Hall of Fame, and what that is that it says the highest recognition volunteers can receive in the state. I do a lot of different things. I don't talk about most of them. I want to be known as what I do in finance, but I am an AmeriCorps fellow, which means I went through some training to understand how AmeriCorps works. AmeriCorps is a nationwide volunteer program. Of course, we do the diabetes, and we're part of a prostate cancer research project. So major things, especially as it relates to prostate cancer, because Black men are dying 2 times more than white men. The federal government has a recommendation of getting screened at 55. The Urology Association, their screening recommendation is at 40. And Black men, by the time we get diagnosed, most of the time we're in late stage. So we're in stage 4, and you don't go in remission at stage 4. They're treating you, trying to make you feel good until you die. And so, I do a lot of that work. Also, we do some work with some teens. We, you and I, as you know, for years, we've been teaching investments to kids, not just, paper trading, not just talking about needs versus wants, but how does the market work? What decisions are made when interest rates go higher? Why right now is gold at an all-time high, right? What goes into the mind of Wall Street professionals that make those things happen? And so the earlier you start with investments, as you know, the better it is. And so on the backs of those things, they're putting me in the Hall of Fame. It's cool because I try to keep a low profile most of the time, but mostly really appreciate it.
Yeah. And it's worth noting, Terry, that you have been doing this for over decades and even longer. You and I have been working together for over 2 decades, but you started getting to the work when you were back a student at Triton College. I mean, even maybe sooner, where you were growing up in Iowa, and came to Maywood and wrestled for Triton, and went on ahead and academia to get your license and everything. But here's the thing that's really most remarkable about Terrence Hollingsworth. He's one of the most humble humans that I've ever come across in my life. I have, I'm a senior to Terry. I have him in age by over a decade. But talking to him, you think he'd been here before. And, his knowledge and his words of wisdom and just his approach is what makes people gravitate to Terry. Unless he told you, unless you Google him, because he's not going to tell you about his licensure and his background and the work that he's done, that he's doing across the country. And this young brother here, and I'm not just saying this because, I know him, but I'm saying this because I hang around good people. I don't hang around bad people with bad intentions or good people with bad intentions. He's a good brother, good young brother with good intentions, meaning that he looks out for others first. And that's how he was raised. That's how he's maintained himself. That's how he raised his children. That's how he is in his household. So, his action speaks louder than words. But what he does because he wants us, those who are not in the world of finance, investing and things like that, to be better, to be more knowledgeable about finance and investments. And then, as he mentioned, diabetes. So there's that saying, give a person their roses while they're still living. And truly, Terry has earned his roses right now at his young age, and he has much more time, many more opportunities. But what he's done, this brother is worthy of being on CNN or CSNBC, heck, even Fox, because he talked to the conservatives as well. When we were at college, remember, we was at Triton College, it was a room full of white men. You know what I'm saying? If they had mega hats in 2003, they would be wearing it. So when they said, who is this black man, this young black man in his early 20s, think he is, let's test the waters. And he responded. And not everybody can do that. Not everybody can handle that pressure. So Terrence, so this is confidence in himself. He schooled these guys. He schooled them. And it was a room full of white men. It was one Hispanic. It was one Latino woman. I think there was one other black female, but there was no black man. It was dominated by white men. And by that second week, no later than the third week, they were like great. They gravitated to Terry. And my thing was, my work is done. And he started running the program, on Saturdays himself, So he's been doing this for a long time.
I've said this just some guy before. I've said this before. I appreciate you bringing me into that space because even now I'm apprehensive a lot of times about how much I talk about, what I do in investments. There's really no incentive, but I also believe this: if the best people, if you don't have access to them, if they won't share their ideas with you, then we're all doomed. And I know this. We come from a place where in Black communities, we're not talking about investments. I've said this, probably last week. The success stories of investment is, someone worked for a job for 30 years, got their pension, got their Social Security, and that's the success stories that we hear. We need to hear more success stories about people that started investing and, 10 years later, they're worth $500,000, they're worth $1 million, and it's tough. There's a very popular guy that goes on to, a lot of popular shows. He's been on CNBC and all these things, and he's built his wealth through real estate. And, so many of us think that real estate is where you build wealth, and they're not making no more land, and we hear all these things. And although those things might be true, the other thing is true is the barriers to entry for investments in real estate are
not easier,
massive.
And
if it takes you 10 years to get a down payment on a house or whatever it might be, get your credit in line, well, the market ain't waiting for you for 10 years. You got to go and take care of the business, and you can, literally get on the computer right now, open an account in 15 minutes, fund that account, and tomorrow be trading. And so the barriers to investing are so much lower. And we just have to keep advancing conversations and helping people to not fear the market.
Well, that's why we have these classes, Terry. That's why, some of the families that we've worked with in the past, they've invited us to come back because, years later, they are now, more knowledgeable than they were when they first started. And that was because of us bringing that knowledge, you bringing your expertise from that, the fiscal standpoint, me bringing the economic standpoint and accounting aspect to, this space. And, we'll gladly go to the house. I mean, we gladly go to homes and, investment clubs through families and things like that. They got book clubs. They also have investment clubs. You ain't got to wait for Oprah Winfrey to start an investment club to be part of that.
Mm-hmm.
You can have your own at your own house. And that's what's happening. That's true financial literacy, right? So you talked about needs versus wants and budgets and credit and things like that. That's fine. But guess what? You don't need a credit report to invest. You don't need a W-2 or your tax, your 1040. You don't need to file a tax return in order to enter into as an investor. I mean, certainly you should do your homework and have some knowledge, but what better knowledge that you have if you have access to resources? And that's something that our people are missing, access to resources. And that's why I was lifting your name up, because you are the resource. You are someone that people could come to, especially during these turbulent times in the economy, as it relates to investing. So again, congratulations on receiving this award, but I know the work is not done. And as you see what's going on in the economy, especially as it relates to this tariff policy that Donald Trump initiated, that caused the stock market to tank, but now he's paused on what he has said earlier and paused on saying that he's going to fire Jerome Powell because the market reacted negatively to that. And now he paused on saying we're going to continue to increase the rate. Like I said, this brother backslide better than he moved. What was that? He backslide.
Look,
and he moved better than Michael Jackson. I'm like, that brother just floating backwards. Like, I didn't
right.
145%. No, you did. You said it was going to be 145%. You said you were going to fire Jerome Powell. Mm-hmm. You said you were going to eliminate everybody in the federal government. You said that. And now you backing down,
Look, he figuring out he figuring out that there is some checks and balances with us, which is what our federal government is built on.
That's right. Absolutely.
Which is funny because I'm going to transition a little bit, right? A lot of talk has been talked about the checks and balances at Maywood. And, Trustee Jones, who was trying to create that balance, right? With Mayor Booker wanting to get a new car, right? Now, I'm a little disappointed that some of the conversation was built around just, is the car too expensive and some of those things. What's your thought on
that? My initial thought is, there are other ways to finance another vehicle. My first thought, though, is why buy something new if you're $8 million in debt? You're $8 million in the hole, all right? Unless the vehicle is, irreparable and about to break down. I don't see how it would. I mean, bought it just a few years ago. So I don't, it's not like you're driving it from Maywood to DC like every month or something like that. So, my thing is, why spend extra money? It's like the money that's coming in from the casino. You know what I'm saying? The money that's coming in, that blessing called the casino money. I mean, where's it coming from? And then on top of that, the salary is going to kick in. He's going to make $65,000 now as a part-time mayor. The village manager is making 6 figures, and the trustee is going to be making more money. Who's going to pay for this? So that's my first thought about the vehicle. But in terms of the price, because I saw the meeting online, and Isaiah Brandon, saying it's too much, and others saying too much. There are other options if you really, really need a vehicle. All right, you can lease for up to 3 years. You can repair the vehicle so it's operable, functioning rather. Don't get a driver. You don't need a driver. I mean, what is this? But those are like two of a few options that you should consider. But $70,000 is not something that Maywood can afford. I mean, if you're going to pay $70,000, Maywood cannot afford that. They cannot afford that. So, I think they should be more. I think they should be more savvy with the financial responsibilities of the board. So I know it was an intense conversation that took place between Trustee Jones, Trustee Brandon. I think Trustee Sanchez said a few words. But now is not the time. I mean, it's not the time to buy anything new unless it's something that's needed, unless it's needed. That's just my thoughts. What are your thoughts?
Well, a couple of things. I like the fact that Trustee Jones was making a argument about, here's our form of government. We just coming off an election that said that the mayor should not be making arbitrary decisions about these things, right? And again, if you cannot rely on the form of government that you set up, then you're going to create a problem, and literally that's what we're having at the federal level, right?
Right.
And so, I'm glad that's happening that way. I'm glad that they come up with a process, right, to evaluate, not only when you buy a car and what those parameters look like, but whether you should lease or whether you should buy a car outright. To me, all these things are built around the same idea. What is the measurables that you go with? But that's probably the same case that we talk about with investing, right? So one of the things that I try to get across to young kids and people that are new to investing is one of my biggest pet peeves, and it's part of the reason why I probably keep doing what I'm doing, is you hear people going, well, you should buy this over this. Mutual fund is better than individual stocks and all these things. And they like to throw like Warren Buffett in the mix. Oh, Warren Buffett said this about mutual funds. I don't care what Warren Buffett said. Warren Buffett is a mutual fund. He does not invest in mutual funds himself. He invests in individual companies. He buys companies out of bankruptcy. And so you can't use him as an example to what investment looks like. And so all these things are the right conversations. I can't wait for next week when Attorney Nicolas is on, because these are complex situations on some level, right? You have someone die, and do they need a will versus, is it necessary to have a will if you do other things, right? How do you pull things out of your estate so that
the data shows, Terry, that 70.
So.
Well, I was going to say the data shows that 70% of African Americans do not have a will when they die. 70%. And these are by credible sources. And I was doing some research, and they talked about celebrities such as the late Chad Bosfield. What's his name? Chad Boswick.
I know what you're talking about. The Black Panther.
Yeah, the Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. But these people, they did not have a will when they passed away. And Chad Boseman, talking about Bob Marley, Prince, Aretha Franklin. I remember the headache that went around when Aretha Franklin had like 4 wills or something. things written on pieces of paper, whatever, but they weren't
Yeah.
properly certified, so they did not really count as wills. But 27.5% of Black Americans have a will, and that's it. So that means that 82.5% do not, which is abysmal. So, when people have property, especially a lot of
The
us who
thing
grew up.
about it, yeah, I mean, if you think about Maywood and what has actually happened in Maywood is, in their own rights, our generation parents, they went and they moved to Maywood, they bought properties, they paid those properties off. The kids went to college, they moved out of Maywood because, Maywood was kind of a high crime area, right? Moved to Bolingbrook,
Right,
Naperville,
right,
Schaumburg, some of these other
right,
places, right?
right, right.
And now you have to deal with your parents' estate. And, it kind of goes back to all of the things that we talk about, just everybody having open dialogue, right? Not only about investments, but what does the brothers and sisters want to do with a piece of property? Don't fall out and everybody's mad because
Yeah,
one
yeah,
person want to live in the house, the other one want to sell it,
right,
all these other things.
right.
Those conversations has to happen before the parent dies, if you don't want the federal government and attorneys coming in and taking up all the equity, and the
And
property
so,
have no value anyway.
even on a personal tip, even with my family, down in my Olive, Mississippi, grandparents die, or great grandparents having a property, they die, pass it on to the grandparents, they pass away, leaving it to the parents, then they pass away. And then if there's no will established, or if it's somebody in the family, like one of the beneficiaries, one of the children, they get slick with it, okay? And now all of a sudden you are in probate trying to argue, oh no, he left half of it for me, and then the rest of you guys split it up. Like, no, that's not what it says. Well, where's the will? Dang. So it's like your word against theirs. And it's like I've seen some ugly situations where people did not have a will. Our people, Black people, did not have a will, and they had property in the South, not even just Maywood, but a lot of people who migrated up north, settled in Chicago, Maywood in particular, and somebody passes away, then it's a fight. Like you said, a sibling would live in the house, and then they sell it. They keep all the proceeds, and they don't give it to the other siblings, the surviving siblings. I mean, it's a mess. So I'm looking forward to Attorney Nicolas coming on, because you have assets, even a bank account. You need to have a will, because it can, and it does, get ugly where family members don't talk to each other ever again because they don't have a will, and it's just a mess. So you're right. And there are a lot of
I
abandoned
want
homes
to
in
tell the
Maywood
story of my family
because of situations like this.
Yeah, I'm gonna share the story of my family. It's a tragic story too. I had a cousin, property in Mississippi, and the mom, she didn't. She said, "Hey, I want this property to always stay in the family," but her son gets the property and he sells it. Well, it was oil on the land. And these white people have been pumping oil ever since. Right. Very tragic, man, because her wishes was for the property to stay in the family. You had one person to make an arbitrary decision about what that looks like, and sold it for pennies on the dollar. I ain't sure what he did, but traditionally people don't do well with large sums of money. They spend it quickly. So
they do.
That we kind of know it's the case, right?
Yeah. Well, Terry, like I said, we all have our story. We all have our story. And like I said, like you mentioned Mississippi, there was a lot of oil in Mississippi back in the day. And there is some in there. And it's not just oil, but timber that's on the property. So, that's why Mr. Attorney Nicolas come on next week. But I know we promised not to be here in a long time. But look, man, I think that this is Financial Literacy Month. And I'll leave with this, as far as you and I talking. We have one more week left in Financial Literacy Month. Today is the 23rd. Next Wednesday is the 30th. And then we roll to May. We're going to continue to do financial education. We do it every week. We do it all the time. And I think that what we are doing is we are empowering our people and challenging them to invest, not just tuck their money into a savings account. So if you receive a settlement, not just put it into like a savings account or start an IRA, which, okay, it's conservative, but actually invest in some of that and trying to be part of the solution, not just part of the problem. We need to elevate ourselves because it's essential for not only our present, but our future as well. And I hope that our people in Maywood will realize that Maywood in the 70s, when we started becoming relevant after the Great White Flight, we're starting to become irrelevant in 2025. And that's because we did not take the time to invest. So other communities have evolved. Melrose Park has evolved. Broadview has evolved. Maywood has evolved. And it continues to evolve. So if you want to stay relevant and if you really want to stay in the community, investing is the way to go to stay relevant. Otherwise, you're going to get left behind like others did. And people moved out. The Italians moved out to like Addison and Schiller Park and, other parts of the suburbs and city because they got basically, pushed out, evolved. And nobody realized that, no one foresaw Melrose Park being a mostly Hispanic community. No one sees Maywood until now as changing. And so advocating for diversity, yeah, sure, no problem. But you still have to have assets, Terry. You still have to have a net worth. And that's the point of investing in your future. And that's the way to go.
So we'll see what happens. I 100% agree. And, so yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say this and I'll end with this, and it's unpopular, but here's the truth. If real estate was the key to building wealth and closing the wealth gap, then we would have more wealth than we have today. Instead, our net worth is lowest as it's ever been. And so we need to have a different conversation about how to close the wealth gap and what that looks like and have some discipline about the way that we go about it.
Absolutely. We need to have more of these workshops. I know Mayor Booker talks about grants that he and his office write. There definitely need to be grants or interest investment of time into financial education. And, I know there's partnership with other banks, but banks, a bank and investments is not the same thing. A bank is a financial institution that holds deposits, and it may have a arm for investments, but that is not a expert unless they're licensed, but they don't do investments. They don't. So you need to know the difference between a bank and a financial institution, an investment firm, or somebody who's certified. And again, financial literacy is ending next week. You need to reach out to somebody who has said expertise in finance and investments. Someone like Terry. We have classes online, and we also, if you're interested, that's my email address to reach out, because people ask us questions offline all the time, and we will resume classes coming up soon. But in the meantime, it's easy access to me. I just don't want our people to receive bad information, especially those of you who live in Maywood, to receive bad information and put your money in something that's a black hole where you won't receive an ROI or return on investment. And it starts with knowing, understanding the process. But You don't know the process unless you connect with somebody who knows about investing, who knows about finances. And that is Terrence Hollingsworth. So get on the ball. Let's do this. Let's do it right. Receive good information from a reliable source, not just anybody who claimed to be an expert or a financial coach. A financial coach is not an investment advisor. If you are an accountant,
well, that is true, right? Okay,
yeah.
I said I wasn't going to say nothing, but I am going to say this one thing, right? Financial coaches, right? It takes a long time for even, I get why there's so much confusion, because even amongst financial licensed people, people talk about these things differently, right? Whether someone builds a mutual fund business or, build a positions and stocks and stuff like this, right? How do we define diversification and all these things? But financial coaches tend to not quite understand the investment management side, right? And I was talking to someone just yesterday, and they were talking about how they were into investments and this and this. Come find out, they didn't say a single thing about the stock market, right? They talked about real estate. They talked about something else, and the organization she was involved in was a multi-level marketing business. And I'm like, that is so far removed from what we're talking about, right? So, it's easy enough to understand, but you do need some guidance of someone.
They're not even related.
So with that note, I am going to get off here. But
yeah, definitely. And I'm gonna say this one thing. No, wait, Terry. One last thing.
Yeah.
The vehicle conversation we had. This goes into a strategic plan, right? If there was a strategic plan, then you would automatically place the purchase of a vehicle or any other asset, right, in that plan. Feasibility study, comprehensive study.
That is correct.
But to just arbitrarily spend money on anything when you're broke, the diligence is all. So that goes back again to accounting, economics on the micro level. So I know this conversation is to be continued, and I'm going to leave us with this. The Sykes store, which was located on 13th and Madison, was a staple in the village of Maywood. Many, many children went to Sykes. I think it was called Sykes and Sons. But the Sykes store, right there in the corner, no matter what side of Maywood you lived on, you knew where Sykes was. So whether you was on your way to school, on your way home from school, going to some type of event, or just in the neighborhood, you were going by that penny candy. Some people love the pickles. I love those sugar cookies. And I love the little microwave pizza. I knew it was a microwave pizza for $1, but it was good. And it was kids coming in, and it would be long lines. But Miss Sykes, the Sykes family, they were always nice. They were always kind. And ultimately, I know they closed their business. Rock of Ages took over the land, turned into Vision and Restoration. And ultimately, the building was inhabitable. So they had to tear it down. But you may tear down a building, but you'll never tear down the memories. And I can recall walking over those railroad tracks when there were railroad tracks on Maywood Drive, and walking over to Sykes, either playing, after coming playing Strike 'em Out or getting a rubber ball from there. I mean, it was so many things that you could purchase at Sykes store, but it will always be a staple in the village of Maywood. And, the celebration with the Sykes family is definitely there. The love for the Sykes family and creating this staple in the village of Maywood will never be replaced. So thank you for the memories. Thank you for all the years of providing great service and being kind to the Sykes family. Definitely love towards you, and shout out to you. And we wish the family all the best, whoever takes over that land, whoever's in charge of land. My recommendation is to build another store there for a place to kids to go and celebrate for creating their own memories. But that is our podcast. Tune in to our next podcast where we have our next guests. And please be safe. The season is turning towards spring, which means the weather gets warm, which means sometimes it can get dangerous. So please keep your focus on Christ, be Christ-like, and always love your neighbor. Love your enemies. And always remember, keep God as the head, not the tail. Like us on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube. And until next time, God bless you. Be safe, invest, and good night.